morning, Gill. Welcome to our book interview today. I'm absolutely delighted to have you with us, especially since it is World Mental Health Month. You have published the book Mental Health and Wellbeing in the Workplace, a practical guide for employees and employees, with your co-author, Donna Butler. I'm just going to show everyone the book. I'm going to put it right up near the camera here. Now, I've purchased this in Australia and I've read it, and it's an excellent practical guide with great advice, both for me as a leader, but also as a worker or an employee wanting to look after my own mental health in an organisation. Today, we're going to chat with you a little bit about some information that you and your co-author Donna have popped in the book and the practical advice. But I thought that we could get started by you introducing yourself to us and telling us a little bit about how you came to be interested in this field.
Well, thank you. Thanks, Stacey. Yes, as you said, I'm Gill Hasson and I co-wrote the Mental Health and Wellbeing in the Workplace book with Donna. How did I get interested in this field? I've realised, thinking about it, excuse me, it's something I've always been interested in. What I've been interested in is about people's potential, about realising their potential, about being the best that they can be and fulfilling what they're capable of and realising their interests as well. So that's something I've realised I've been interested in since I was very young, but almost as a child, I can say. But it wasn't until my 30s, because I spent my 20s travelling and having fun. And once I had children, I was in my 30s, I thought it's about time I got, got a proper career. So I went on to do a degree in social anthropology. I'm interested in how people, from my travelling, how people interact with each other, about different people's cultures, their beliefs, their ideas, their customs, their practices. And there's a lot of, sort of psychology involved in all of that, about how people's minds work. So after I graduated, I trained to teach in adult education, and I started to work in an area that was helping courses and classes to help people with their personal and professional development. So I did a lot of teaching courses around career development, just, simple things as well, like writing a CV, a resume, but also personal development, which goes hand in hand. So building confidence and assertiveness. So then I spent many years doing that, and actually together with another colleague, when we both worked at the University of Sussex by that point, we were interested in people's resilience. What was it that for some people, they can have difficulties and challenges in their lives, and yet they can cope with them and move forward, and other people just sink with it. So we were interested in the factors that help us to become more resilient, and that's very much linked to people's mental health. How can we help our own well-being and mental health? So I wrote a series of books after that. I got into writing. I wrote books on emotional intelligence, mindfulness, positive thinking, that sort of all the sort of stuff that I'd been teaching.
Wow, that's incredible. And I did read that you have written 25 books. Is that right? Or have you more since then?
I have written more, yeah, and I've written a series of books for children on emotional health. So dealing with things like being teased and bullying, about dealing with worry and anxiety. So yeah, I've written quite a lot.
Yes, congratulations. And everything you've just said really aligns so well with MiTraining. Our slogan is find your best self at work. And we also deliver mental health training as well as resilience training. And we're finding that resilience training is very popular at the moment in terms of a way of teaching employees how they can bolster themselves in an environment that's always changing and dynamic, I suppose we could say. So let's start then with the basics. What would you say mental health and wellbeing is in the workplace context?
Well, both mental health and wellbeing, they're interchangeable sort of terms and concepts, really. But first of all, it's important to know what either of those means. And when we have good mental health and wellbeing, all the sort of research and studies have sort of come together to pretty much agree that good mental health and wellbeing concern being able to cope with difficulties and challenges and stress in life. And of course, that's different for all of us. That's really important to know. So being able to cope with difficulties and stresses and challenges but also to be able to enjoy life. So it's finding that balance, actually coping with the problems, but also having a good time as well. And again, that's different for all of us, the ways in which we enjoy life. So when that comes, if you put that in the context of work, there's always going to be difficulties, problems and challenges at work, not just stress and pressure, sometimes because it's just so boring. You might be in a really boring job and there's no stress and no pressure. So you've got to learn to deal with that. So at work, mental health and wellbeing are about managing the difficulties and challenges, but also enjoying work. You know, you're going to be there for 8 hours a day probably. So yeah, it's actually getting some enjoyment from it, and meaning and purpose. That's very important.
I love that. And to be cognizant or mindful of why we're coming to work, that, you know, it is a place, or it can be a place of where we get our joy and where we
Yeah.
get our meaning from. It's good
Yeah.
to be reminded of that, particularly in the last few years when there's just been so many changes. It's just good. And I can hear that career development person coming out in you there as well. Um, why would you say that it's crucial for both employees and employers to be cognizant of this in the workplace?
Well, because I think, yeah, because we spend a lot of time at work, and yeah, and we can get a lot of enjoyment at work. You can love your job. Most jobs work that I've done, I've really enjoyed, and that's great. That really adds to your life.
Mm.
But and also, yes, you have to be aware when work's not working for you, and start, and probably we'll talk about this. How can you deal with that? But also for employers, of course, the very bottom line is, if you've got a business, you want to make money, you want it to work. It's economic reasons. If we're going to be really brutal, if you've got happy employees and who have got good mental health and are able to cope with good situations, then they're going to be productive for you. So if they're going to be productive, you're going to have a successful business. So yeah, I don't think there's any way of getting away from that. Businesses are there to be productive and make money. So their key asset are their people.
Exactly. And so much research, and obviously your book to support that in black and white now, that good mental health in organizations is linked to satisfaction, productivity. So it makes good business sense. I loved the title of one of your chapters. It was quite provocative, and it said, "Is work good for you?"
Yeah.
And you found that it was and it wasn't. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, yeah. So, yeah, again, lots of research shows, and we know this personally, either from our own selves or from friends and family, that yeah, we can have enjoyable jobs that we like, actually look forward to going to. I had a job when I was a youngster, where I worked at an airport in a coffee shop, and we were all very young. We were all in our late teens and did it sort of as a weekend and a holiday job. And I can honestly say I enjoyed it so much. I would have paid to work there. It was that good. It was great. So yeah, it's important that we enjoy our jobs. I've forgotten the question you just asked me, Stacey. Why did I get into that?
Is work good for you?
Yeah, it's work good for you. Yeah, so we know it can be either from ourselves or from friends and family, but we also know how it can absolutely devastate you. It can lead to serious mental health problems when you're just not coping and you're not enjoying work. And I hear this all the time. Only last week, my sister was telling me about her place of work, where there's some difficulties and problems, and colleague of hers just can't cope anymore, went off sick for 2 weeks, then extended it for 4 weeks, and now she's resigned because she's absolutely struggling. So yeah, we spend a lot of time at work, and if it's bad, we really suffer.
And I love that you pointed out that it's different for everyone, and so it's nuanced, but also
Yeah.
that we will love different things at different phases of our lives. You know, your beautiful example of loving that job that you did when you were young and probably, getting caught up in those lovely memories. But you obviously have done different things in later in life. And so it comes at different phases and different times.
Yeah.
And it can come at any time. Things can be going along smooth sailing, and then something can happen, either an environmental problem, an organizational problem, or right down to that granular colleague that makes things challenging for us. And so the book kind of separates out some practical strategies for employees and practical strategies for employers, which I love. I'm going to use it as my guide and have it on my desk all the time because it has such good practical step-by-step advice. But starting with employees first, what happens if they are confronted with a challenge at work? What can they do? What strategies can they put in place? Either before the challenge happens, or I suppose as it arises, there's probably two.
Yeah, I think beforehand there's something, I'll probably refer to this more than once today, something called a workplace action plan. And it's also called a WAP, so workplace action plan. And that's something that you can download, actually. I mention it in the book. Here in the UK, you can download a workplace action plan from an organisation called Mind.org. They're the mental health organisation in the UK. But quite simply, it's something that was developed by an American woman, and it's something that all of us should do, really. Is actually, it just asks you questions that helps you to consider things like, what helps you do well at work? What sort of things do you find difficult? What are the sort of things that stress you? What sort of support might you need when you're struggling? It's something that you can discuss and fill out with your team leader, with your manager, or it's just something that you can do for yourself so that you're aware of what happens when you're struggling. So I think we just need to be aware that, there's nothing wrong with struggling at work, with not coping for whatever reason, whether it's the demands of the job, whether it's relationships with other people, whether it's not having good communication and not knowing what on earth's going on at work. These are the sort of things that we need to think about and think, what will I need to do? Put it in advance. So, but then, as you say, either before there's a difficulty, or if you're currently going through difficulties, actually write it down, because that's one of the things that happens to us in any situation when we're worried. Things just swirl around and around and around. But actually, when we talk to someone else, or we write it down, we externalize it. So actually, a workplace action plan can actually help. It has questions that prompt you to think about what works for you at work and what doesn't work for you at work, and what sort of strategies, who you could talk to, where you could go, what you could do for yourself that would help you cope with difficulties and challenges.
Sounds excellent. And that was mind.org.
Yeah.
What a great idea to have a plan in place so that if you do find yourself struggling, you know the steps that you can take. It kind of, I suppose, gives the control back to the person experiencing the challenges.
It does, and you can sort of revisit it every 6 months or so and think, do you know what? Yeah, I've got some, new ideas about how I could cope, or actually, unfortunately, I've got some, new difficulties, or I've worked out what really works for me. And, I want to, record that as well as a reminder of the sort of things that I can do and that I can ask other people to do, maybe to support me.
Mm, mm. And the book goes through all the different mental health challenges that might be observed in our community or in a workplace. On the flip side, then, what would you say your advice is to a leader who observes that someone in their team is struggling and perhaps might have a mental health challenge? What kind of steps should they take to support that person so that they can thrive and be their best self?
Yeah, I think the thing is, for all of us in any situation, whether we're talking about a friend or whether it's an employee or colleague, we're
Mm,
we're worried about saying the wrong thing,
yeah.
So just, or if you say to the person, you don't seem yourself today, what's up? And if that person goes, I'm fine, thank you. You think, oh God, I best not say anything at all. The thing is, it's if you're already in a workplace that has a culture of openness about mental health, you're already halfway there, because the employee and you yourself as a team leader are already in a context where talking about mental health is normal. It's fine.
Mm,
So and that sort of thing starts at the top, at the very top. So there has to be a real recognition of being open to talking about mental health, not constantly, obviously, let's not make it a massive thing, but just, for example, small things that you can do is to have in team meetings, start with, how go around, how's everyone been? What's been bad this week? What have you struggled with? What's been difficult?
mm,
What's been good? That sort of thing. So it really starts with a culture of openness around mental health, and then as a team leader talking to people on one-to-one meetings, how are you doing, and asking without prying, how are things at home, because what happens at home, if we're struggling at home in our personal lives, that often comes, it comes with us at work. So you've got to be genuinely interested, you've got to have a culture of openness at work, and then it's far more likely that you're going to be able to say to somebody, I'm a bit concerned about you, you don't seem yourself, or you seem, you're struggling, or would you like to talk about it, or you know where I am if you want to talk about it, or that sort of thing. But if you're not in that culture, that's definitely going to be a lot more different, and you don't want to make assumptions. So I think the only thing you can do is the same as with a friend. I'm worried about you. Be genuine. I'm a bit concerned. Just give an example of some of the behavior changes you've noticed, and say, so, I'm worried, do you want to talk about it? Is there any, or maybe another time? And if they brush you off, then you have to let them know, well, I'm always here. But if there is a concern, you can talk it through. And if it's something that's outside your remit, then you need to help them find where else they can get the proper support.
Mm-mm. I love that you focused on normalizing talking about well-being and mental health in the workplace, and that we can't separate ourselves out from our personal lives. It's just not possible. And vice versa too. Sometimes we take
Yeah.
work home with us.
Yeah.
People, however, are very good at hiding that they're, experiencing a challenge. And so they might come to the leader and say, I'm having a mental health problem. In that situation, what would a leader do then? What's their responsibility if someone sort of discloses to them that perhaps they're experiencing depression or anxiety?
Yeah, so in a large organization, there's probably policies around that, and it's something that HR can do to help. It's not something, we're not, I'm assuming that none of us are properly trained in mental health issues. So if somebody really is struggling, you can first of all ask, what can you do to help? What do you think the organization can do to help? And that person might have some ideas, and you might have some ideas. But when it comes to a serious mental health problem, you really do have to be able to refer them on. Obviously, you're going to say, have you been to see your doctor? And if they're reluctant to do that, is there someone that will go with you to do that? But it's, again, I'm not sure what the organisation you'd have in Australia, but at the one here, our UK mental health organisation is Mind. But that's something else you can do, is you can read up on some of the mental health issues, and get yourself more familiar and knowledgeable about different situations, and recognise a little bit more when something really is quite serious. And then you do have to refer them on, and do what you can just to find where they can go. If they don't want to go to their doctors, where else can they get support and help?
Yes, yes. Great advice. And MiTraining delivers mental health first aid training as well across a couple of days, which is a really good workshop to help people to be familiar, or understand more deeply the different mental health challenges, and then how to have a conversation and refer them to the appropriate support that they need in their community. So
Yeah, that's really important. And knowing what else is out there, because there is a huge amount of help out there, but
yes.
it's knowing about it and accessing it.
Exactly. And part of the training when I did it was finding out about that localized help. So there's in Australia big national organisations, of course, but in communities there's often specific help for local regional areas. And so
Yes.
it's really interesting, like you said, to familiarise yourself with those local institutions where you can refer someone so they can get the help that they need. What would you say are some challenges in the workplace in terms of advocating and supporting everyone to live their best lives in the context of mental health and wellbeing?
Some of the challenges. So talking about yourself as a team leader, do you think is that?
Or even an employee, however you'd like to respond.
Yeah, I think that the challenges in the workplace are something that we're all familiar with, even when we enjoy our job. First of all, there's the demands. Um, you know, Often we're expected. to fill in for other people, that they don't replace someone else, and so you end up doing half of their job. Yeah, the workload, the work patterns, the environment, that all of these can be problems and or present problems at work. The level of control that you feel that you have over your job, if you feel that you have no independence whatsoever, that can be an issue. And the level of support that we get, not just from team leaders, but from colleagues as well, support and understanding. And that leads on to another really important issue, I think, is relationships at work. I think they are absolutely key. How well we get on with other people, the level of support and encouragement that we get, the level of understanding. So, yeah, relationships are really important. And then a couple of other things, I suppose, around the demands and control, your role at work. Do you feel that you've got responsibilities, and do you feel that you get training at work for your role, or are you left to sort of like, half the time I don't really know what I'm doing, or I'm asked to do this, but I haven't had any training in that. And then another sort of final thing is what happens, and I see this a lot, when there's changes at work. To what extent do you feel that you're communicated about that? If they go, oh, well, we've changed that, or we're not doing that, or we've decided we're all doing this now, whether that's amongst colleagues or from the top, when there are changes, how well informed you feel that you've been. And I've experienced that recently, just doing some freelance work, that all sorts of things got changed with the way people wanted me to do something, but they just didn't communicate that to me. So I was left actually quite stressed, thinking, wait a minute, so I thought they wanted me, so how does that work then if I now don't want? So yeah, these are sort of areas: control over your work, the level of demands, the environment, the relationships. These are the things that are important.
And can have an impact, absolutely, on stress and your ability to perform your job at your best. In Australia, we've just had some work health and safety legislation come in around psychosocial risk, and it's now the responsibility of organisations to mitigate those risks in organisations, so that employees do feel like all those things that you listed, the job demands and the controls, are all mitigated against and are at kind of an adequate level, I suppose, for them to function in the workplace. So Australian organisations are busy, conducting or gauging how employees are at the present moment, and then putting in place strategies to respond. And I think that's probably a very simple way of going about it. Would you agree?
Definitely, that I mean, that's the beginning, really, isn't it? So
Yeah.
I talked about having a culture of openness around mental health at work, but actually that's got to start somewhere. So you can start by actually trying to gauge and assess what, how people do feel, how stressed are they or are they not at work. So actually having some surveys and questionnaires about how people are feeling about their jobs, about their work, about the level of demands and control, their relationships. Some simple questions around that, just to start assessing how do people feel about their work and how are they coping.
And it's great to do it across an organisation. Then you can zero down into subcultures, because there might be variances and differences across the organisation as well. So then pinpointing the areas that need the most investment, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Very good. I'm really appreciating the information you're giving our listeners today. As we kind of move towards the end of our book interview, I'm really curious about your thoughts around the future for mental health and where you see things moving in the future.
Yeah, I think on the one hand, I get really sort of excited about when I hear, and I was only talking to someone a couple of weeks ago who works for a large organisation in the north of England here, who she was telling me about all the ways that the organisation are open to mental health issues and well-being, and all the strategies they've got in place. And I just thought, excuse me, oh, that's just great. You see, things are going right. And then I hear about, as I was saying about my sister telling me about the person where she's working, and actually they're a small organisation, and unfortunately there's one person that's really undermining everybody else and screwing it up for everyone else, and people are leaving. And then I'm despairing. I think, oh, nothing's going to change. So
yes,
I think with very big organisations, they're recognising their responsibilities ethically as well, that they've got to be seen to be supporting people. So that's great. So I think that the large organisations set the pace, and gradually and slowly the smaller organisations, because people will work at larger organisations and then maybe go to work for smaller ones and go, well, that's not how they did it when I was working for these people, so hopefully it will filter down. So that's my hope, that people will start to recognise in smaller organisations the importance of looking after well-being and mental health at work, and particularly for the very small organisations. Some of them are, they're owned by one or two people, and they've got, everything on the line if their organisation doesn't do well.
Yes.
So hopefully people will point out to them the economic business benefits of supporting people at work.
Absolutely. And any final advice for our listeners, either employees or employers, based on your fantastic book, that you would like to sort of summarize or wrap up with today?
Yeah, I think the thing is that I've really learned, and I've taught a lot of courses and classes on confidence and assertiveness. And in more recent years, in the last 10 years, so many people have come on those courses because they've recognized the need to take responsibility for being more assertive at work, for having boundaries and limits, for saying what they want and what they don't want, not in a any sort of rude, destructive way, but in a constructive way. So I would really recommend for employees is start to learn how to be more assertive about what you do and what you don't want. You need to take responsibility for that, because as much as employers also need to, you've got, people aren't mind readers. So of course, I'm now going to say I've written a book on how to be assertive. I have. It's called How
Fantastic.
to Be Assertive. It's called How to Be Assertive. But I also find that it's something that people. It's not difficult to learn how to be assertive. There's certain steps which I point out in that book, but then it's about actually practicing it and just doing it a little bit at a time. And again, I'll go back to my sister about the little organization that she works for. She's decided she will not be pushed around by this person, and she said, I've been amazed at how assertive I've become, and recognize what I will and will not put up with. And it really works to learn to be more assertive. So that would be my sort of top tip for people.
So something that we can all do, that we can all work towards to help ourselves in an organisation, particularly when we're having a challenging time, before it gets to the point where we're feeling exacerbated or experiencing mental health. So a great proactive tip. So thank you, Gill. I love that. And I want to thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate, firstly, that you've written this great book, because I love it, and I think our listeners will too, but also for your expertise. I'll certainly be checking out your book on how to be assertive as well. So that sounds fantastic. It's later in the day here, but it's early morning there, and I heard that you're going to have a beautiful day. So I wish you a lovely day, and I hope to talk to you soon.
That's great. Thanks very much, Stacey. Bye-bye.
Bye.